Checo, I'm co-chair of the Metropolitan Council meeting of the Equity Advisory Committee. I'm joined by Vanessa Jenkins, my co-chair, who will also join me in presenting this information. So good evening. It's Tuesday, October 15th, and I call this meeting to order. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Now, if there's no objectives to this, we don't really have to take a vote on it, but if there's a question to the agenda, please ask now. If not, then I'll assume it's approved, and we'll move on to approval of the minutes.
Our next order of business is approval of the minutes from August 20th, 2024. I have a motion to approve the minutes from August 2024 meeting.
I can move that.
Point of clarification.
That'll
We
be
have our
quick.
quorum.
Mini quorum.
If it's been moved and seconded, then we take it to discussion.
Okay.
We don't
Oh, that's
have
right,
a
we
quorum.
don't have quorum. All right. All right, well then, here's the other one is we have public invitations for 5 minutes. We have members from the public who either signed in, we don't have signs at this point, but who has joined us to provide some information or ask questions here. And so we give the public 5 minutes to speak. And at this point, we don't have a line to sit, but we have folks here. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak at this point? Please let us know. Yes.
I did send an email to speak, to testify or to speak right now, but it's about the Blue Line Extension project and anti-displacement. I know it's in your agenda, so is it a good time to do that right now? A couple of minutes?
You know what? Well, if it's a timing issue for you, you need to go. I'd actually rather have it during the same time we're at the Blue Line, because I know you've been working on this with them as well.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, seeing no one here, we'll move on to our agenda. And so the first item is affirmative action plan.
I just want to say,
What's that? Yes.
Councilmember Checo, Chair, I think it was a rule in there to shout out the vendor for the
Alright.
food for today.
Okay.
I know we added that in.
Yep, I see it on the agenda now, and it's only yellow, so I should have saw it. And so the food for today's meeting is from 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And we really appreciate it. We've had some wonderful vendors come in that are also members of ours and the MCUB participants. And so we fail to recognize them as often as we should, but we'll do that from now on, because they've really served us well over the time here. All right, Mr. Ashante.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, committee members, Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And I'm here today to talk about the Council's regulatory responsibility to our State Affirmative Action Plan and our workforce equity initiatives that we have at the Council. And Greg, you can go to the next slide. All right, first I just want to provide an overview of some of the ways that we track, monitor, report, either through regulatory compliance or just council policy or initiatives on our workforce equity efforts. First is our State Affirmative Action Plan, and in your handouts you'll see the appendices from our State Affirmative Action Plan, which are published, and really breaks down the progress report, our utilization. Oh, there we go. Progress report, utilization, and others. I'm going to be going over some of this in detail, but it's part of your handouts for reference. We also have a regulatory responsibility to provide a federal EEO program plan, which is similar but different than our State Affirmative Action Plan, and is submitted to Federal Transit Administration. I did fail to mention our State Affirmative Action Plan is due every 2 years to Minnesota Management and Budget. They provide oversight and approval of our plan, and we are in a plan year. It is even years. The next one will be due in 2026. Our federal EEO program plan is on a 4-year cycle, and it's reviewed and approved by Federal Transit Administration. We also produce another regulatory report to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the EEO4. There's also our last EEO4, which was submitted in 2023. It will be submitted again in 2025. If you look at that, it is similar to some other reports that you might be familiar with, like the EEO1. It does break down the demographics of our workforce at the council, adds the component of salary, and then breaks out permanent versus temporary employment. And then we are, through the chair and being led by our director, Cynthia Jordan, the Metropolitan Council is participating in the Anti-Racism and Economic Justice Trust. And we produce quarterly a report out on our workforce and other activities related to anti-racism and economic justice. It does break down our demographics of our workforce, also looks at salary, but also looks at folks earning wages below, get the right wording here. Full-time regular employees earning less than a sustainable wage for a family of 2 working adults with 2 children, which is $29.42 hourly. And then also for our purposes, we have developed internally a affirmative action plan dashboard that is available to all council employees. It does monitor our progress of how we are achieving our goals from our affirmative action plan, but we also take the step of disaggregating that information because it is important to disaggregate information, to understand it, and to get to equity and equitable outcomes. We are working on, with our IS department, on producing a public version that will be available to the public as well. We got a first draft of that from our IT department, and we provided some feedback and changes that we want to see, so we are very close to publishing a public-facing dashboard. And last but not least, our Human Resources Department also has a workforce dashboard that they maintain that is also available to council employees. They provide their information in a different format than we do, look at a couple of different aspects of our employment processes, and I would encourage this committee to invite our Human Resources Department to talk about their efforts in how they produce reports and information on our workforce. So getting to our state affirmative action plan that we submit to Minnesota Management and Budget. Again, as I talked, it is submitted every 2 years. This current one that we submitted in 2024 covers state fiscal years 2024 through 2026. And we received our final approval from MMB on September 12th. I point this out sometimes, it does not require council approval. Some of our regulatory compliance activities do require council approval, mostly on the federal side, but this one does not. But it must be signed by our regional administrator, the council's affirmative action officer, who is the director of the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity, Director Jordan, and then the council's director of human resources also has to sign it, Cassandra Tabor. We are now, once we receive final approval, then it goes through the signature process. So we are now in the process of getting those signatures from all those folks, and then following through with our obligation to post it and disseminate it where we are required. The roles and responsibilities that are identified or that have to be identified and discussed in the plan are the role of the regional administrator, again, our affirmative action officer, our HR director, and then additionally, American with Disabilities Act Title I coordinator, American with Disabilities Act Title II coordinator, and then all council employees and leadership. Some of the key components that we're going to talk about this evening is the executive summary, which is just basically a snapshot of what our employment picture looks like here at the council in that time frame. The communication of the plan, how we are going to communicate it and disseminate it internally as well as externally. We have some external responsibilities to post it on our external website, but also other places so that the public can easily have access to that report. There is a utilization and availability analysis and establishment of goals and timetables. If you have underutilization, we'll talk about that. Our progress and personnel activity reports, which measures how you did on your last plan in achieving the goals that you had. Did you achieve them? Did you not? And if not, why not? And how are you going to correct and mitigate some of those barriers that you encountered? And then you have to have a method of auditing, evaluating, and reporting on it regularly to council employees, but also leadership and those that have responsibilities in executing the plan.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Where are those methods posted? Are they posted in any place or on the website?
Committee member, are you talking about the methods of reporting and auditing?
Yeah, of auditing, evaluating, and reporting.
Yes, it is part of the narrative, that's part of our plan, but one of the ways that we do it is through that dashboard that tracks our progress to, if we have any goals, how we are tracking towards our goals. It is updated quarterly, on a quarterly basis. We also report this information through our director to the executive leadership and leadership at the council. We also have a work group that consists of OEO, Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity staff, and Human Resources staff, where we have identified our key objectives and strategies. We'll talk about those, and we monitor our progress and how we're moving on those. So those are the ways that we are monitoring our progress. And again, even though our state plan does not require us to disaggregate that information, we do disaggregate it through our monitoring efforts and our reporting, and our strategies reflect that. And you'll see that when we get to that point.
Okay, thank you.
I probably should also mention that our federal plan, if you look at our appendices A and B of that federal Equal Employment Opportunity Plan, the feds do require us to disaggregate the data where the state plan does not. But I will say too that the federal plan also has a category of multi-race, and you have to develop strategies for that, which in some instances I believe makes it difficult because, as an example, an individual that self-identifies as multi-racial, that could be Asian and indigenous, you probably are not going to have the same sort of recruitment plans as somebody who self-identifies as Hispanic and Black or Asian and Black. So, but they are grouped together. The other weakness, I think, is it depends on folks that self-identify, and not everyone self-identifies as multiracial, some depending on culture, which is a lot of times the most important thing in terms of self-identification is how folks self-identify. So I just wanted to point out those differences between our state and federal plan.
Thank you.
The snapshot data, as I said, just lists all active, classified and unclassified, including temporary employees by EEO job category, our hires and rehires, promotions, and then separations, and the reasons why folks are separating from the council. Again, all of our data that we look at is a range from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2024. And so the data collection period for our 2026 plan started on July 1st, 2024. There we go. One of the main components of the affirmative action plan is the utilization analysis. We have to determine the external and internal availability weights, and some of those weights must be 100. I guess the best way to explain this is some of our positions are filled internally, and some are by external. So we look at historical data to see the frequency in which positions are filled by internal processes, either through promotions, transfers, versus external, and we weight those to get those availability weights. And then our recruitment area, we've defined our recruitment area as the Twin Cities, 7-county metro. And we use those external and internal availability weights to calculate the percentages and availability for each job category. And then that is compared against the calculated availability percentages. Again, I describe this and go through this because this is different than our federal plan, more extensive, a lot more math involved in our state plan than with our federal plan and how they calculate availability. Our progress report is really, again, looking at our past plan from 2022, where we had goals. Where you see a no means that we did not meet the goal that we had from our last plan. And where it says yes, that means we met the goal that was established from our last plan. Just as an overview for women, we had goals across the board in each job category. And we met the goals for protective services, sworn and non-sworn for women. For racial and ethnic minorities, we had goals in 2 categories. We met the goal for technicians. We did not meet the goal for skilled craft. And then for persons identifying with a disability, we had established goals in 4 categories, and we met the goals for 3 of the categories, that be officials and managers, administrative support, and skilled craft. And separation analysis, this just looks at separation rates. Again, the handout that you have for our state plan breaks it down in a lot more detail. I guess the one thing that stood out for me in looking at this data was deaths, in terms of women had a high percentage in terms of they're representing that separation category. I think there needs to be a lot more information and study done to start to determine if there is an issue or what is behind that. But it stood out to me, it jumped out looking at the data. It it seemed disproportionate in terms of the representation of women, and it was consistent across the job categories. So it led me to think about some questions. You know, are we similar to other agencies or other agencies that have a transit function? Just a lot of questions. And again, it would take a lot more study, but you could probably do a whole separate study to try and understand what it means. But I'm pointing it out because statistically, it definitely jumped out as significant.
Could be cancer,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
because there are high rates for women of color.
Question here.
Just looking at the report on the slide here, and the numbers aren't jumping out at me as how do I organize these? You've got females and persons with disabilities and racial ethnic minorities, a total down at the bottom for those categories. You know, I'm not so sure that I wouldn't like to see more disaggregation here on this chart and to understand, so for females being 412 total separations, what's the total separations? If I add up all of those then, do I get the total separations or racial and ethnic minorities repeating females? I'm just, you know, wanting to see that in a little different representation. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't all make a whole picture for me.
Yes, Councilmember Carter, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Yes, so I was definitely careful to point out a couple of things. Our state affirmative action plan, it is just a regulatory compliance activity.
It doesn't
How
require.
they don't break out or disaggregate the information. We do look at it, and then also, although there's a handout
Yeah.
that has more detailed information on this. This is more of a high-level overview
Just
for this
to pick out.
presentation. Yes, but the totals and how it is, and that's how I was able to see,
So I
those
refer to this
statistics.
one for that.
yes.
Thank you.
So where we have underutilization, or where we identify where that exists, we have to develop goals and timetables for addressing that underutilization. This chart establishes for this time period through 2026, where we have goals and what those goal percentages are in our workforce. So again, women, we have goals for every category with the exception of technicians, persons with disabilities, skilled craft and service maintenance, and then racial or ethnic minorities, paraprofessionals, and skilled craft. Again, the things that really jump out, of course, is women across the board, and then the skilled craft category where every protected group we are underutilized. I think it's also something to point out that is includes our union employees. So not only the ATU, but I would say more significantly unions like the electricians, 49ers, those positions as well are included in that skilled craft. And service maintenance, which is where we have the most number of employees, that is our operators, mechanics, and where that is located. So a lot of that information drives these strategies, best practices, and corrective actions. This is not an exhaustive list of what we are focusing on, but these are some of the major strategies and activities that of the things that really jumped out at us. So retention is a theme that has come out of this. We were making significant strides in terms of our retention efforts for women and persons of color. We were closing the gap, meaning that our number of racial and ethnic minorities and women were increasing and the rates that they were leaving the council were decreasing. And we were making progress over the previous two, and that changed in this reporting period. So you will see that a lot of these strategies are either directed at trying to understand why through what we call stay interviews, to connect with employees to understand before they leave what barriers or issues they may be facing or why they could be leaving our organization, but also exit interviews in collecting and analyzing that data. And then in terms of, you know, where we are underutilized for every protected class in that skilled craft, we have work led by our workforce development and HR department. We have apprentice and training programs aimed at bringing those individuals into paid internships and apprenticeship situations that lead to employment with the council. And there was another program, there's Week Zero programming, that's also led by our workforce development department, supports Metro Transit bus and rail operator hiring. And currently more than 75% of our newly hired operators are new to the bus operator industry and do not have a CDL credential. So this is a paid week of intensive learning so that they can successfully obtain their CDL permit. And that's a required credential for our hiring. And then service maintenance as well, had a significant separation of females and Black employees. So again, this is where we looked at the disaggregated data and not just saying that it's, you know, the whole of racial and ethnic minorities. This is something that is being experienced at rates that are statistically significant for women and Black employees. So all of these efforts are really to support what our workforce equity goals are. We want to assess our hiring barriers and ensure that we can mitigate bias, attract and retain highly skilled individuals within our workforce, that our workforce reflects the diversity in our region and not just at the operator level, at all levels throughout the agency. We want to adopt a policy that supports the hiring of people with disabilities, and we want to create a culture where all employees can contribute their best and fair value. And we want to be seen as a leader in this region for advancing equity and racial equity in the region.
Shanti, question?
Hi, Brittany Clausen. How successful are the stay interviews? Are you noticing, you know, a shift where if there's a conversation and some sort of negotiation that people are willing to reconsider? And then the same is for exit interviews. I'm curious how successful you guys are with conducting those interviews.
Can you remember, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair? First, I'll start with the stay interviews. The objective of the stay interviews is really not to identify folks who are considering leaving. It's really to assess the level of engagement of our employees and identify where they at. Do they have what they need to be successful? If not, do they have a professional development plan? Are they working with their supervisor? Those sorts of things that we can address before they're even considering leaving. And then in terms of the exit interviews, that's probably where we need to make our most strides, because a lot of times those exit interviews, either they're leaving and they're not willing to provide some of that information. So we do get some, and we do need to analyze it. I think that's the next step, is analyzing that data and seeing if we can detect any themes or patterns that we can address through our employment practices. There's nothing at this point today that I can say this is a theme that we identified through the exit interviews. But we hope that this round, that we can get some of that information and be able to report.
Yes. Councilmember?
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
My question is, the exit interviews, are they required or is it voluntary or is it?
Dr. Carter, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. The exit interviews are not required. It is something that we encourage all managers to conduct, but it is not a requirement.
Okay, is there a way we can incentivize?
It's a good question, and it's definitely something that we can put on our agenda for our work group that we have with Human Resources.
Good question.
Yeah, so I was just kind of going through, like I was gonna be, Mitchell Hansen, sorry. Like I was gonna apply for the full-time bus driver job, just to kind of see what it'd be like. And it said like 59,000 to 74, which is under what a livable wage would be, I think according to the Met Council. And aside from that, you know, like the rules to get that job are really stringent, you know, and I know like, you know, some offenses are very serious. But some of them are mistakes that people make, and some of them are even kind of have to do with socioeconomic status. Like if I have a 2024, you know, Land Rover, and I could just hit a button and talk to someone and like drink my water versus having like a 2010 Corolla where maybe I get a call and I have to pick it up and I get that offense and that now I can't get the job. It just seems like really stringent compared to some of the other ones where it's like people do make mistakes. And I mean, it could be a stretch, I don't think it is, but I think it's, you know, like I you know, had many crappy cars in my life, and it's really nice to have the ability to just be able to hit a button and talk and do that. And I think if someone, I mean, drinking and driving is one thing, but also people do make mistakes too. So I would just, encourage just kind of like looking into that a little bit more, because someone could be a great bus driver, you know, like, and really, really be good, really be talented, have all the skills and made a mistake. But I mean, 10 years is a long way to wait, I think. You know, like when I think I got when I was 21, I was 31, I was a very different person. So looking through it, there's just a lot of very stringent rules that I think could be kind of maybe, and I was looking at the non-sworn officer rules, and they're very lenient, you know, compared to that. And they're two different jobs, but I feel like we could be missing out on a pool of really good people that may have made like a mistake or two, or just a mistake a while ago, you know, that could really be good assets. Just being someone who's made mistakes, and you know, I just you know, come through it. That's something that kind of stuck out to me, because sometimes those are the best people that you want. But I don't know, that's just a thought. Thanks.
Committee Member Hanson, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. I think it's a relevant conversation, because one of the things that we are committed to is assessing any barriers. Sitting here right now, I don't know, I can't tell you how big of a barrier that is, but we want to assess barriers, and when we can mitigate some of those or address them, that's part of our strategy. Again, and probably Metro Transit folks or HR folks will probably be better to speak to this, but just in terms of my experience, some of those rules are mandated and some of them are our policy or internal, and those that we have control over, we definitely have an obligation to look at them to see how they're impacting how we bring people and retain people here at the council.
I appreciate that. And you know, like talking on your phone and drinking and driving are two pretty different different things, but they were all in the same paragraph, so I just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
Advisory Member?
Thank you. It's been my experience working as a union chief steward in Hennepin County for 36 years. My experience with women, and particularly women of color, is the fear of saying what's happening, because there's a feeling of not being safe. That if I say something, when I go for my next job, it's gonna follow me. Or if I try to transfer, it's gonna follow me. And so my question is there any organizations or any other outlets besides a union where women can talk? Like diversity groups, or where they can take their concerns, and they know their concerns are not going into a hole and just disappearing, but their concerns are actually being collected and they're being heard.
Committee Member Davis, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, that's definitely a good point. I don't think it is even singular to women of color, in terms of, the feeling of maybe they'll be blackballed or overlooked for other opportunities. One of the things that we do have, our affinity groups and employee resources group, there's a women in transportation group, and that is definitely a place where folks can go and bring their concerns that come, for the most part, to our leadership and then also to the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. But that is an issue I think that is lingering. And again, we see it also in the small business side, where small businesses sometimes don't want to complain until it gets to the last minute because of that same fear of, am I going to get this next opportunity? So those are definitely part of our conversations. But that's part of creating a culture to where they do feel safe and they do feel that they're not going to be retaliation. And then also having clear policies that address it as well. The policies are not going to completely eliminate that fear. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done relative to culture and creating that sense that this is a place, as I mentioned before, where you can contribute your best and also feel that you have an outlet. But I think the main things that we have are those employee resources groups as a place that is not part of the, as I would call it, for lack of a better term, formal structure, where folks that have some of the same interests, goals, and can voice their concerns in a vehicle where those concerns can be passed to the appropriate people. And that is something that is administratively managed by our office and Lila's team. And I don't know if she wants to comment more, she probably doesn't.
You covered it.
You give your cell phone number.
Right.
Yeah, because, I think about it, when I think about women in the workplace and working with a lot of women over 36 years, as a woman, and I'm going to speak for myself, I bring my life experiences to my job every day. And I think we all do. I bring the base of how I grew up into my work ethics, or whether I had one or not. And I know that just having conversations with female employees, a lot of that comes up. And there's a lot of other things, background things, like, is she a single mom? Is she got kids at school that are having, getting bused and getting fed and, after school and getting time off? So there's a lot of things that surround us that I've heard women say, I don't want to rock the boat. And so for no other outlet, no other recourse, they just leave. Because it's easier to just back away from it than to try to get help to deal with it. But there's a lot of things that management doesn't understand or doesn't take into account, like childcare. Or, can I start later because my kids get on the bus at 8 o'clock, and by the time I get to work, it's 8:30, 8:45. But if the manager says, no, 8 o'clock, then, what are you gonna do? So it's understanding sometimes those issues that surround us away from work that affect us at work.
I definitely agree with that.
All right, Brittany Clausen, and my question is, are there competencies for supervisors? Are there particular themes of training that your supervisors go through that they demonstrate in certain areas they're equipped to support their team in these, areas?
Committee Member Clausen and Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are competencies within what we call Perform, which is our performance management system. There's also anyone that is a hiring manager or participates on a hiring panel or recruitment panel has to take training, unconscious bias training. And then there's also what we started, and what HR started, I think 2 years ago, which is the equity scorecard. So I think I listed that as one of the strategies. So there's a scorecard just in terms of recruitment, how well we did in our recruitment relative to equity, and through that process, and a scorecard is created, and that's measured and reported out. And I think at last time we reported and measured, it was at 93%. So there are some competencies, and again, I think the real challenge or real effort is to continually look at those things to see if they're sufficient in terms of getting the desired outcomes, and if not, the ability to be able to pivot to something else.
Yes, Mayor Eason, I wanted to add on to what Councilmember Davis was mentioning. As you were kind of saying also, you can't control the larger culture per se, but you definitely can control workplace culture. And that's something that can just be developed over time to have that. And so, looking at just kind of the statistics, it is very concerning with women and how much resignation we're seeing and whatnot. And so, I would definitely be interested in something delving deeper into that because the disparity is just massive. And I just can't stop thinking about it, just re-looking at everything right now. And I definitely think kind of giving leeway with certain things, like you were mentioning, a single mom may not be able to strictly come at 8:00 a.m., right? And so kind of shifting what is able to be shifted, the policy within the organization to give leeway to those things and kind of make that more objective, where people, specifically women who are in those situations, can actually stay in the workplace.
Yes, committee member, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, we've definitely had those conversations and looked at data from Department of Labor and other sources relative to women specifically. One of the things that we learned definitely during COVID is that a high number of women left the labor force, and a lot of the economists, experts, if you believe the experts, are saying that they're not coming back to the labor force. The other thing that we learned through some of the studies and information out there, and some things we already know, that women on the dollar make less than men. And when you factor in childcare, and then you factor in women of color make less on the dollar than Caucasian women. So sometimes it's about math. And unless we have some strategies to address some of those things that are specific to retention and recruitment of women, I think we're going to exist in this space. So those are the conversations that we are having. I wish I had, the answer, but honestly, I don't. But I do know that we have to come up with some answers and strategies relative to retention of women in our workforce.
Yes, sir.
I'm just kind of adding on to that too. I guess, yeah, it seems like in the one department, MT, I'd imagine is Metro Transit. in here, the MT.
MTS or MT?
Yeah, it just seems like there's like a pretty steady exit, or like people are leaving quite often from that. And the wages are low, and given that the Met Council, you know, I used to work at St. Stephen's, and I've looked, they've done payment standards calculations more than I'd ever like to ever again. But when it's, you know, like an old nuclear model, like, you know, 2 parents, 2 kids, it just kind of like throws everything all over the place. And like, I always found so many issues with that because it just doesn't, it's just not how the world really works anymore. Or if it did, you know, but it's, I think just kind of looking at it through that lens makes it really complicated. And like, just like you were saying, it's like, because, yeah, one difference from that, and now you have someone who's unable to really, you know, and you want employees to enjoy their job, you know, and you know, they're expected to look like an advertisement. You know, they're expected to look like they'd be happy, and they're dealing with so much stuff. You know, like, I mean, they're social workers, they're dealing with distractions, they're dealing with all this other stuff, let alone their own life, let alone their kids and everything else. And the pay that they get, I think, for Metro Transit doesn't reflect all of the things that they do. You know, because it's pretty low, you know, and I think they're in charge of our lives, you know, and I just, for me, I guess, I ride the bus all the time, I ride the light all the time, I see them dealing with so much, and I'm like, they should be getting paid way more than this, you know, especially during COVID, they're gonna shut the thing, and they're just like, not dealing with this, someone got their credit card stuck in the ticket thing, you know, there's all these little problems, but if you're not making a livable wage, I mean, I'm not surprised that they're leaving, in like large numbers. So I mean, I guess it's like if the high, I mean, if you do the statistics, you know, like the most salary ranges fall between like 80,000, maybe 160 is kind of a lot, you know, that's a good amount. And I'm not saying anyone should be paid less, but I mean, if there's any way, I mean, for employee retention, just to, I don't know, really like value them, you know, and because just in all the things that they do, because they really are rock stars.
I'm going to interrupt you 1 second here and have Shanti finish this presentation because we have a whole nother set here too, and we want to make sure we get everybody in. Thank you.
Thank you for.
No, thank you. My pleasure to be here, and I'm sure I'll be back again at some point.
And you know, it's a pleasure of ours as well. I think we've come, when you've been here, you've provided some great information and willing to kind of engage the members as well, and so I think it's very helpful. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up. So now we have the Metro Blue Line extension. Nick Thompson, Deputy General Manager of Capital Program. You put this all in one batch? Capital Programs. Kelsey Young, BLE Environmental Manager. John Toy, BLE Senior Small Business Manager. And thank you for coming out. You guys have been busy over there.
Chair members, thanks for hosting us. Thanks for having us today. Just always is Nick Thompson, Interim Blue Line Project Director and Deputy General Manager of Capital Projects.
Kelsey Young, Environmental Manager with the Blue Line Extension Project Office.
And Conor Wilson-Go, Manager of Public Involvement, Metro Blue Line Extension Projects.
John Tao, Blue Line Extension Senior Small Business Specialist.
Yeah, just
Just
real
1
quick
minute, we're
there.
pulling everything. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Okay, but real quick, we did have, do you want to speak before, after? You're actually engaged in this a lot. I was on that blue line for a while. So maybe we can come up front here and.
I could add after, if that's okay, you know, you have something prepared, so just maybe to add more context to that, would that work? So,
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. We're working on the presentation.
I'm gonna resend it though.
And a reminder, as we ask questions, please state your name, because there's other people watching on TV, and plus for us to accurately record your actions. Thank you.
1 minute, we had a little malfunction. Sorry, my internet is taking more than usual to connect. It still hasn't connected. May cancel for you, just give me some time.
I was at a conference last weekend, it was all on technology, and so they asked,
Yeah,
they
okay, now I got
said,
internet.
you have AI? I said, no, I'm still using KIDS. It's my kids, every time I need something, I go to my kids, they fix it for me.
No more microphones,
Okay.
you're gonna have to pass it.
Pass it around.
Ashanti, could I ask you a quick question
Yes.
while they're setting it up? I just mentioned I was at a conference and it was the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And one of the questions there was with what's going on with Florida as a government entity, going backwards with D&I programs and letting,
I'm sending it now.
restricting and then taking away materials and everything. And do you hear anything in the community or your network about that, or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's that, oh my gosh. I think it's a coordinated effort. A lot of these groups are strategic about where they introduce challenges, there's legal challenges, and they know which districts are sympathetic to some of those ideologies and philosophies. Texas, Florida, Eastern District of Kentucky, those blocks. And some of these cases are like, they're ignoring decades of precedent and history in terms of these efforts. And we are going backwards in some cases. But I think it goes to the elected officials in Florida and how that has transpired for sure. But yes, we're hearing on the fronts of where this is happening, and especially on the legal front and some of these challenges. 200 district court judges or new from the former administration, and just the things that are going to the Supreme Court, of course, like I said, we can't rely on precedent anymore in terms of what to predict or understand what's happening. But I just think we should assume that at some point that's going to come to our borders, and we should be prepared and have strategies in place to for that eventuality.
For those of you that in Florida, they either took away the funding or just asked to cancel all university programs, D&I, the staff, the vendor contracts. They're looking at each item there each time. Thank you. Not knowing how long this is gonna take, maybe we should go some introduction. You can do the overview of the project itself.
Sure. Everybody has handouts too, correct? Yes. I can refer to the slides there as we move forward, and we'll catch up on the screen. Alright, so we're here to talk about the Blue Line Extension Project. Just a little brief history of this project is this is an extension of the existing Blue Line light rail that currently ends at Target Field. Goes from Mall of America through the airport to downtown Minneapolis and Target Field. We're extending it northwest through North Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park. So it'll more than double the length of the blue line that exists today. We call it the blue line extension now, because we're extending the line. But the day that it opens, it all just becomes the blue line. Trains will travel from Brooklyn Park to Mall of America and all the stops in between. This project has a long history, like our transitory projects have it. Internally, we call this Blue Line 2.0, because the first Blue Line extension project, which was on a different alignment in Minneapolis and Robbinsdale and part of Crystal, followed an old railroad, Highway 55, Olson Memorial Drive, and then went up a railroad, existing railroad for 8 miles. We made a lot of progress on that design until I think about 2018 or so, when the railroad decided that we could not build a light rail in their property. And so we had to pause the project, regroup the project, and then we came back with this new project, which we're advancing with an alignment that is now through the north loop of Minneapolis, Washington Avenue. We'll talk a little bit about it more, but Broadway Avenue up to Robbinsdale. And so it's more following existing roads for the entirety of the project rather than the railroad part of it. So, we just completed a process called municipal consent, which I'll talk about. We're in an environmental phase. These projects have a lot of different processes in them. We're in a design phase, so we hope to finish design in 2026. With construction beginning parts of it as soon as late 2026. Major construction starting in 2027. We anticipate this project will take 3 to 4 years to build, and so we're seeing operating trains that customers can use at the very end of 2030 or maybe 2031. So it's still got a few years ahead of us, but we made real progress this year, which we'll talk about in terms of the environmental process. So referring to what I see as slide 4, just kind of covering that general time frame. In the next year, we will finish the environmental process, which Kelsey will talk about. One of the big milestones is to seek federal funding. This is a $3.2 billion project, and so funded both locally through Hennepin County as the local funder for the project, and then federally. We anticipate projects like this, light rail or BR bus rapid transit, we try to get up to 50% or 49% of the project funded with federal funding. And so that's a big phase in 25 and 26 is to apply for federal funding to try to receive that. We need that federal funding to actually construct the project, and the county has their funding for the local share, but federal funding needs to be secured. And it's a very competitive federal funding process, so there's no certainty that we will receive federal funding for this project. We have to compete against other cities across the country that are also building major transit. So referring to slide 5, it says at the top 2024 schedule. Well, we talked a little bit about how it's organized and then some key milestones this year. What the project is guided through a complex governance structure. We have a corridor management committee that is required by state law that has a membership of representative elected officials from each of the cities along the corridor and the county. It is chaired by the chair of the Met Council, co-chaired by Hennepin County Commissioners. And then it has representatives from the community as part of that. Blue Line Coalition is a member of this corridor management committee. The Minneapolis Park Board has an elected official that also is part of this because of where the route follows. We go to that corridor management committee almost every month. They advise the project, and really they're a key step where they recommend the route, station location, and other elements of the project. They officially recommend them to Met Council and Hennepin County as part of the government process. And then Met Council is, from the federal government's eyes, the Met Council is the lead agency for this, and so we are leading the project, but we lead it with our funding partner, Hennepin County, and the cities staff and we have staff from MnDOT that are part of this. So it's a very complicated to deliver a project like this, but Met Council eventually becomes the owner of the project once it's open. And obviously, as the transit operator for the region, we are the operator and maintainer of the light rail after it opens too. So we've been meeting with this corridor management committee every month this year to kind of get us through design.
Let's go back to the previous one, the one that shows the map, so people get a sense of where we're talking about, because that goes right, you can see it from downtown all the way to Brooklyn Center on that one there.
The Plymouth Avenue is on Washington Avenue, and as I'll talk about a little bit later, this map is old now because since the past 2 weeks we've been, the city of Minneapolis has requested another station at Washington Broadway, and so I'll show where that is in future slides, but we are updating that to include 13 stations on this alignment. You see light rail has stations more spaced out than a typical bus route, and you see that. And then at the very northern end, that is where we'll have an operations and maintenance facility. That's where our trains will be maintained, parked. In addition, we have park and rides in Brooklyn Park, Crystal, and Robbinsdale, connected to stations along this route. We have really good transit service currently today in about half of this area. The portion northern half, this will be expanding transit to a lot of areas that do not have good transit reliable all day. So it'll be both serving existing markets and new markets in this area. Any questions about this slide?
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
Have you done any traffic control studies, for example, downtown Robbinsdale and 44th?
Chairs, member, yes. We've done a lot of traffic control studies that are part of the design process and then also part of the environmental process. And so we've released draft results to environmental documents that show those traffic studies. And we are still finalizing some of those. And then we work very closely in for example, at Robbinsdale. The road that we're building on is owned by the county, so we are coordinating traffic studies through the county as the road authority, but also Robbinsdale as the connecting roads, making sure that they work, and we're showing good operations of both the roads and the rail system, but also the safety of the pedestrians and the walking and bike trails that are part of this too. Yeah, so that's all documented in environmental study, and happy to ask it, we can.
I have another quick question if I could. I live in that area and I haven't seen a train go on those rails in 50 years. I'm 70, so I've been driving around that area. The other day I saw a train crossing. Is that unusual? Are they checking the tracks or what's going on?
Chair, member, I think there's a train a few times a week. Is it twice a week? It's very, very rare.
Very rare, because I'm around there a lot.
But it is an operating train, so we have to have safe crossings there. We will be making a few upgrades to some of those freight rail crossings in Robbinsdale particularly. But we're moving away from the alignment here. No longer is in the railroad right away. It will be more in the highway, in the middle of the highway in that section. But it is an unusual railroad because it's very infrequent.
And then lastly, you mentioned federal funding. I know that the people in Robbinsdale are opposed to it and people in North Minneapolis. Does that affect the funding?
Okay, Chair, member, we just 2 weeks ago received official city support from all the cities, including Robbinsdale and Minneapolis. That was a vote of the city councils, and so federal government will typically look at that vote as a vote of support from those communities. Though all these projects always have some opposition. There's no doubt there. Any project that we build, so the FTA would weigh in public involvement, public comment on the project too, in their decision of whether to fund it or not. That would be considered.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
I just have a quick question, kind of what you just asked. If you don't secure that competitive federal funding, what's the plan?
Yeah.
Chairs, so we go back, at that point, we would go back to Hannibal County as the current local fundee and seek their advice on what their next steps would be. We always take the positive approach that we're gonna secure that funding. We do know that we are very competitive in terms of, they have a very technical formula for how they rate, and we expect to rate very highly relative to other projects. but it's also it's a federal decision, a political decision, and so it's a high risk. And so I guess we'll regroup at that point if that doesn't occur to see what's next steps. But we move forward with the assumption we can secure federal funding until we're told we cannot. So our region has been really successful in all our transways in securing federal funding. So we have a good track record in our region, so that gives us some confidence.
Mitchell Hansen. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of emotional for me, just, you know, I have very close ties to Harrison. I've worked at, you know, the school there, I worked at Washburn Center for Children. I've been there for a long time, and we've tracked it for like the past 10 years, and we watched the, you know, there's like a brief stint where, you know, things kind of slowed a little bit, but overall, in a matter of several years, things just skyrocketed. We got redistricted in terms of at the state level. The neighborhood feels different, and then we had Hennepin County come through and kind of like, you know, just like a massive construction project, and we got an idea of some numbers. And I talked to the, you know, one of the owners of the liquor store there, and I was like, how much, you know, revenue have you lost? He's like 22.4, and that's just from the summer. So now we have the green line coming around from the back, and that's happening. So what happens if this funding isn't secured, and you know, you're going on, you know, making changes to Broadway, altering the community, stuff like that. It feels like the same thing's going to happen, and we've also looked at that data too in the past. I believe, you know, since it was announced, there's an overwhelming amount of properties that have changed hands, and I think it's just important to always keep in mind that like every time it's mentioned, developers and everyone else, they're gonna come in, and so it's like time really is of the essence. And in terms of affordable housing as well, you know, I mean, it's an opportunity zone, no capital gains taxes. Be really careful what people's motives are, and I would hate to see the same thing happen all over again. And we're really getting nailed, you know, and I'm having people coming in my office crying all the time, like it's really tough. And I'm like emotional talking about it, and I think people just need to recognize that like every single tiny decision that's made will affect someone, whether that's someone, I mean, having to shut their store down for a day, that costs them. And I was asked by people in West Broadway and other people that I talked to, just one of the questions I didn't know the answer that they asked me to ask is like, can they phase the construction when they do it so it's not all at once? So we're just kind of like in this stagnant position for like an extended period of time, and people think we're closed. I didn't know the answer. Maybe it's probably an engineering question, but we just saw it very quickly in Hennepin, and we had to, you know, stores grand opening had to, you know, stop. We had stores had to close down. People were losing revenue. So I'm just wondering how much, you know, just the outreach to the community is so important, and people they're scared. And I think basically the River North district has come up a lot from people, and they're afraid that that's what people want. And people are talking about it more and more and more, and they think that they're just gonna get displaced by this new neighborhood. That's just a combination of their own neighborhood, and I can empathize with that. But just kind of touching on that, like learning from past lessons, but also Heritage Park as well, you know, like, I mean, they're suffering right now, and then also, I just would hate to see that happen, you know, again. I think everyone knows that. It's not a secret. That's all I just say. Sorry, it's emotional.
Well, let's get through the presentation, because I know we have some other folks too, speaking just to what you're saying and what efforts have been made. So thank you.
I'll answer the one easy question. We won't phase the construction. It won't all be under construction at once, but we don't have those plans yet, but they will be developed in the next year or two and communicated, so. Move on. Municipal consent is a very important and unique process in Minnesota where it's called municipal consent. It's a state process, not federal. Where at this design phase, what we call it 30%, where we know some information about the project, but not the final design. We are required to officially submit the design plans to each city and the county, and then hold public hearings. The Met Council and the county had a joint public hearing in August. And then each city along the route must hold a public hearing and a vote about the design. And so we just completed that process last week on October 10th. And so I'll talk a little bit about the outcomes of that. But this is a very unique step where the communities officially are asked to vote on the design of the project, and if either to say they support it or they would like changes to that. And so this is something done for major transit projects here and major highway projects, this type of process. We are required as a council to ask if they support the location of stations, the location of the alignment, where it ends, and general dimensions of stations. But also in this process, this is where the cities and the county also provide us recommendations or priorities for the city as we build the project. And we received a lot of priorities that they want us to incorporate in the project from the design, but also about the community character, the construction impacts, and other elements related to the project. And so we'll be incorporating those in the project. We don't spring this on the cities in the summer. We work every week with the cities on the design and the project. We have a technical group, so by the time we ask them for their support, they know exactly what we're asking them for, and the designs that we're submitting reflect what they've asked us to incorporate that. So we don't want any surprises in this. But it's an elected officials voting on this process, and of the 38 elected officials who were asked to cast the vote, 33 of them supported that, which happens to be the highest kind of proportion of support we received and for any of our library projects when we went through this process. So it shows that there's support for this project, but there's also a lot of worry and concern too that was expressed just about the construction impacts and other impacts, and the support for the community and wanting to maintain the characters of the community. So this is not an easy vote for the cities and the county, but we recognize that they really did come forward and support this major investment because of the benefits of the project. We did in this process are going to change the project, and so I want to highlight a few of those that are outcomes. This is a great process where the community weighs in. They ask us what to change in the project, and then we make those changes. The first one, major change, is Minneapolis asks us to add a station at Washington Avenue, just south of Broadway Avenue. This is a rendering of that potential station location. In this area of Minneapolis on Broadway, crossing the river, is ripe for a change in character. It is. There's plans in Minneapolis's long-term vision for this to, for a lot of development to occur here, and a lot of new jobs are planned, and some of them are developing within parcels here. And so there was a desire that our stations were not serving this area, so they requested the station be added to the project. And both Hennepin County and Met Council have weighed in and said they will add that station here. So that's a major change. Second one. Excuse me. Sure.
Yeah, I just had a question. What's the additional cost?
We have not developed that final cost, and so we have stated the cost of the project, overall project was $3.2 billion before we started municipal consent, and that the cost would change after that based on the input of the cities. So this plus many other changes, we will be revising our cost estimate in the coming months and then releasing it. Lowry Station, this is on the border. Half of the station is in the city of Robbinsdale, and the other half is in city of Minneapolis, and all of it's in within the Minneapolis Park Board area of the Grand Rounds, both Theodore Wirth Parkway and the Victor Memorial, and also is our station connecting to North Memorial Hospital. You don't have to be an engineer to look at this and say, well, that's a complicated area to fit a station into. In the middle of a park, and so the Minneapolis Robbinsdale and the Park Board have weighed in to ask us to keep studying this design to see if there's even improvements we can make. And so we continue to study that both through the environmental process and design process, but both cities weighed in that this is an important location for a station to connect to the communities at North Memorial. So there will be a station here. It might change it a little bit where its location is and its connection to Broadway Avenue and the Parkway. but it's an important location, so we're evaluating the actual station there yet. And then in 40th in Robbinsdale, it's a little tough to read, but the north is to the left, and when we went into the process, our station was located on the south side of the intersection, and it was gonna have some impacts on our church property, and their long-term plan for that church property. And then the community itself had a lot of feedback saying it would make more sense to move the station to the north side of the intersection in Robbinsdale, because it's closer to the park and ride that we're building there, closer to the businesses. And so City of Robbinsdale, in their resolution of support, did ask us to change that. They had initially asked us for the to be on the south side, and now they want it on the north side, and so we'll accommodate that change in the design. And I think that is a really good, strong improvement to the transit and how it connects the community in Robbinsdale. So that's just a little bit of the municipal consent process. Now we're gonna talk about the environmental process, and then move to anti-displacement.
Thank you.
Just a, quick
Yes,
question.
okay.
Quick question before you move on. Because those agreements were already committed, even though they prioritized and delivered those priorities during municipal consent, that is still positive and it does not require then the public hearing around that. Is that correct?
Yeah. We will not have another broad municipal consent hearing process for reapproval of the design. The one change where we might, the Lowry Avenue station, if that in our process comes back and changes enough, we will have to ask Robbinsdale and Minneapolis for a reapproval just of that station. But we wouldn't need a public hearing, or we'd need the cities to officially support that, and so we would never ask them unless we knew they would support it too. So that's one area that will change.
Okay.
And then, so I don't think we'll go back into that municipal consent process, so I think this, but it's also, we will again we continue to work with the cities in the county. We're not, that's not the last time we're there, that's just it's a checkpoint in the overall process.
And I have to add to staff and the work that you've been doing and hearing from our cities and agreeing to those critical areas of work that have been needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I will do some background here about our environmental review process. The meat or heart of what I think we'd like to focus on is our. Oh, yes, sorry. Kelsey Young, Environmental Manager with the Blue Line Extension Project. So a lot of this information is background so that we can maybe focus on the mitigation development portion. So an environmental impact statement is our process to study social, environmental, and economic impacts as well as benefits of federal projects following the National Environmental Policy Act. So our current phase of environmental review builds on the previous phases of the environmental impact statement for the BLRT or the Blue Line Extension 1.0 route that was completed back in 2016. So we are now in a supplemental EIS phase. The supplemental draft environmental impact statement was published earlier in the summer in June, and that focuses on the changes in the project, of which there are many since that previous phase of environmental review. So looking at that updated route that Nick gave an overview about earlier. And so that's the purpose of why we are in this environmental review supplemental phase, is to look at those impacts and benefits that have changed with this new route. The next step that we are working on right now is the supplemental final environmental impact statement, or final EIS. And the purpose of that document will be to update our understanding of the impacts and benefits of the project, but that's also where we commit to mitigation and other commitments that would be carried out as part of the project. So we are working on that supplemental final EIS now, and we're anticipating publishing that document next summer. In parallel with this, we also identify permits and our Section 4F process, which deals with parks, as well as some other topic areas. And I'll give a little overview of all of the range of topic areas that we look at. But the key is that the supplemental final EIS is that final step that would allow the project to move forward into construction. So that timing is important to understand that right now we're continuing those efforts to avoid, lessen, or minimize and look at ways that we can mitigate the negative impacts, maximize the benefits of the project, but the work of implementing that and carrying that out will need to happen after our final EIS is completed and our record of decision. That's our document where we make those mitigation commitments.
Issued by the FTA.
Correct.
Record of decision.
Correct. All of this, we are working closely with our federal partner, the Federal Transit Administration. So we have a whole range of topics that we study. Again, the social, environmental, and economic impacts and benefits of the project. So we look at land use, the community character, property impacts, where the project would need to buy property rights, business impacts, and that is both, in the long term as well as during construction. Impacts to historic properties and cultural resources, parks, visual impacts. The list goes on, and just want to clue people in that this is a document where we look at a whole range of topic areas for the whole corridor. Again, just a recap of where we are right now, we did publish that supplemental draft environmental impact statement in June. There was a comment period associated with that. We are now in that stage where we have kind of digested a lot of those comments. We are updating our analysis for the final EIS, and I'll talk about some of those specific next steps of what we're working on. And we anticipate that publication step will happen next summer. A lot of the information that we brought forward here to this committee is related to environmental justice, and just want to frame us in about what we mean by environmental justice within the environmental review process. There's a federal executive order that defines what environmental justice means in the context of government or federal projects. And the definition of environmental justice communities within that executive order are any populations that have a significant proportion of people that have low incomes or who otherwise are adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality, and who experience disproportionate and adverse human health and environmental burdens. So within this executive order, largely what this environmental justice analysis has for the past couple decades focused on income and race. With this updated environmental executive order, it calls for us to really reach out to the communities that a project is impacting and benefiting, and understand how do those environmental justice communities self-identify, and allowing for us to look beyond just those categories of income and race. And much of this population or community identification step relies on mapping and demographic data like census data, but it also allows for us to pull in information about what are we hearing as those priorities or concerns or categories, identities that we should be thinking about in this lens of environmental justice. So we have a list of examples here of some of the identities or communities that we have both heard about as topics or areas of concern, but also some of those communities or identities that we know that interplay together, particularly as it relates to how systemic racism shows up in our communities.
Excuse me, can I?
Sure.
Have you worked with the Northside Green Zone? You have?
Yes,
Okay.
yes we have.
Have they voiced any concerns?
Chairs, committee member, we have heard concerns from that Northside Green Zones group that I would say echo the concerns that we're hearing about from particularly the communities in North Minneapolis as a whole. So continuing to hear concerns, and some of this I will touch on a little bit, but concerns about the impacts of the project on the community and the number of, acquisitions and those types of concerns, and how will those impacts be mitigated. So I think we've put a pin in that of wanting to come back to the Northside Green Zones group alongside lots of other outreach that we have planned for our next steps.
I used to sit on it. I live in North Minneapolis, and I'm a 2-time cancer survivor from a sarcoma. And if you know, a sarcoma is caused from chemical exposure. And I've lived in North Minneapolis my entire life, still live there. So that's why I asked the question, because air quality has always been a concern in North Minneapolis, and the toxicities, particularly around the railroad area and those areas within Washington and Broadway.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, absolutely, that is the type of, community history that we are talking about when we talk about environmental justice concerns.
Thank you.
Why is environmental justice important in the context of this environmental review? We are looking at the Blue Line Extension project as an opportunity to bring transit investment and the improved transit service to the communities in the corridor. And that's an opportunity that we see to look at that history of what government projects have happened in the past, as well as the history of how the communities were shaped by some of these systemic and historic policies that still carry through, that the pain and impacts of those practices, such as redlining and racial covenants, have carried out still to this day in terms of where people live, and kind of setting up communities for how those disparities still carry out in terms of economic and other decision making, and so that context of history that still lives on today and affects communities today is why we talk about environmental justice in the lens of both reducing the negative impacts and maximizing the benefits of projects like this one. So this is a little bit stepwise laid out in terms of how we identify project impacts. Maybe in the interest of getting to the mitigation piece, there's lots of information in the supplemental draft EIS about how we identify the impacts. Most of the information in the rest of this presentation is more focused on those mitigation steps, but basically to say that we look at all of the project impacts for everyone in the project corridor, and we look at how those negative impacts as well as benefits intersect specifically with environmental justice communities. Not to say that all environmental justice communities have the same concerns, but that's the first step of the lens that we apply, and then building on our understanding of what impacts are environmental justice communities concerned about, and what can we do about that, as well as how do we maximize the benefits of the project. So with all of this, this is all to say that much of the Blue Line Extension project corridor is within and intended to serve environmental justice communities, but we need to be thinking about those adverse impacts of the project and look at how we can mitigate or offset those negative impacts. This current phase, as I mentioned, is the supplemental final environmental impact statement. Right now, we are working on that, and right now our focus is on developing our mitigation. So I'm skipping a little bit of information here about how we have defined those impacts. But to say that when we talk about environmental justice impacts, some of those topic areas that we are focused on developing mitigation for are listed here. The business impacts during construction, loss of parking, particularly as it relates to businesses, impacts to community character. Those impacts we are identifying primarily in the 21st Avenue corridor in Minneapolis and that indirect displacement concern. The development of mitigation, all of this will be subject to approval by the Federal Transit Administration, but these are the mitigation pathways that we are focused on that we have. We've identified a need for continued outreach. This list is not exhaustive of all of the project impacts or mitigation, but these are these focused areas where we are seeing opportunities to carry out anti-displacement within the project. So we'll touch on that a little bit here too.
I was just wondering, out of the impacts that you listed, percentage-wise, which one of the impact has the largest percentage of occurrence?
Chairs, council member, I think all of these kind of carry equal footing, if that makes sense, in terms of
So I was just
what we
wondering,
need to do something.
based on the observed data, like from the past, you don't have to have it now, but I'd like to know which one has the biggest impact proportionally.
Sure, I think, so maybe to correlate between the impacts and the mitigation, our next phase here of outreach will be developing the mitigation together. So it's somewhat of a qualitative answer, I think, to what you're asking, that ultimately our mitigation needs to feel like it's in line with the expected negative impacts of the project. So I think that in terms of like which of these topic areas are we seeing the most impact in, I guess that's not quite how we're looking at it, but that we'll be developing mitigation that feels like it is in line with the nature of the impacts.
Quick question in regard to safety. There's already existing issues with drug use and homelessness and so forth on the trains now. Are you guys looking at that and how to address it? Did you implement even more stations, and are the corridor cities going to assist with those issues?
I thought that too.
That's exactly what I was thinking as well.
Co-chair, that's a great question. It's probably one of the most type of questions we get in our public outreach. And so essentially public safety as part of the transit is an operational, both a design approach and an operational approach. Metro Transit overall has a safety strategy, public safety strategy that are developing today, that will be in place when we open also. And so it's evolving based on what the issues are out there. And so how we've approached this with the public and the community, we've stated that it is as our absolute priority of the project. What we're building in right now is the design elements of safety, proper lighting, environmental safety that are like capital fixed. But as we get towards opening, we have to have a comprehensive safety plan. We have to demonstrate, we have to respond to what the risks are at the time. And it's probably going to be different in 2030 than it is today. I hope it is, because that would mean we've been successful in kind of reducing some of these issues that exist today. But we also see it as part of, it's not just Metro Transit's responsibility, it's a community responsibility too, right? We have statutory authority for safety on the trains and on the platforms, but City of Robbinsdale Police in Brooklyn Park, they recognize that they're part of that too. So we have joint agreements, for example, between the police forces when we build these lines on how we're going to interact in safety. But we know safety is like our number one priority because we need to deliver a safe system for our customers, but also to attract customers to the system. So it is foremost. And even as we've been out talking about design for a project that opens in 6 years, we've used all these public inputs to talk about what we're doing today on safety, so people understand and then listen to what we can do differently to improve safety and tackle some of these really hard challenges related to drug use and other elements. So people could just use transit to move around and feel safe on the system.
Thank you.
Mitchell Hansen. So is the community and community, no one can ever get that right, CGIST, we'll just call it that. Is that community and environmental justice screening tool, is that like set in stone? Because I kind of, that's something I struggle with, because like, if you look downtown, right, one of the qualifiers is lack of green space, like depth. It's like it sits downtown, so like they're gonna have lack of green space, but then you can almost fill in anything else there to kind of make it count. But when you use, I think we've had this discussion, but when you use the EPA guidelines, asthma, PM 2.5, PM 10, heart disease, things that actually are causing people to suffer and die. And I think, lack of indoor plumbing and lack of, like a low English proficiency as like qualify, like just like that can qualify you or down, like to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's a little, to me, it's just a little illogical, because it just seems to make so much sense to be like, what are the things that are harming us? Like what's gonna give my stepdaughter asthma? Like, it's not gonna be like indoor plumbing, that's gonna suck, but it's gonna be all of the pollutants in the air. So when addressing these, it seems, I just wish there was a way to like blend them, like together, so that we could like really target it. And I know that's not really probably possible, but that I just would feel so much more comfortable if we could be like asthma, heart disease, lack of green space, fine, but it just seems like it's missing a lot, and I know, I think, there's some people, pretty high up people I know in Minneapolis that are in charge of writing those rules, and I guess it's a little conflicting to me.
Okay, excuse me, right now, we've got about 30 slides left in 15 minutes, so if
We can always talk about this, we're familiar.
Okay, yes.
All right, thank you. So our mitigation topic areas that are under development now include funding for community programs that is largely intended to offset those community character and anti-displacement, displacement concerns. And we are looking at those pathways now, and that certainly wants to be part of our next phase of outreach to develop, what type of programs would be good mitigation. We are looking to establish cultural placekeeping design groups starting here this fall, and the work of those groups would be largely into next year, but working with community members in cities along the corridor to reflect the cultures that are there now, with that idea of preventing or addressing cultural displacement, that feeling that my community doesn't feel like mine anymore. And so looking for those some design elements to be incorporated into the project, station areas and other locations. We are looking to develop a storefront resource center, or maybe 2 storefront resource centers in the corridor, where people can come get information about the project, about construction, and also get connected to supportive resources and other information such as what's provided by Hennepin County in those programs. We are looking to identify workforce development and local hiring initiatives and other construction-related workforce commitments. John will talk about that in a little bit here. We're also looking to identify mitigation in the topic area of business support during construction, looking at what other projects around the country are doing. And then also looking to implement some parking near the Penn and West Broadway area. We know that is an area of key concern, and so we're looking at implementing some off-street parking in that location as part of the project. All of these topic areas need continued engagement and outreach to affected communities, and so that we can work together with communities and identify what those mitigation pathways want to be. So that outreach framework is under development now. Our next phase of outreach around the mitigation will commence here starting in November, and then will likely be ongoing into and through next summer, with that implementation phase starting as soon as our supplemental final environmental impact statement is completed. And we expect that we'll have mitigation that will apply ongoing, before, during, and after construction and into the operations phase. So that's the lens that we are using to develop our mitigation. Much of this environmental justice mitigation is intended to live out our anti-displacement recommendations that are within the project. So to talk a little bit about all of the things happening in the realm of anti-displacement, there's a coordinated action plan that is available now on the Your Blue Line website, and it talks about, it frames interventions, and so those interventions are largely by government organizations, but as well as governments, community organizations, and other groups that all have this shared mission or shared goals around preventing or addressing displacement. So that coordinated action plan is available online now, and there's recommendations that apply to both Hennepin County as well as Met Council and the project itself. So this is a full list of those partners. Ricardo, if now is a good time for you to talk a little bit about the Anti-Displacement Community Prosperity Program Board.
Cool.
Would welcome you to come talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Ricardo Perez. I use he, him pronouns. I am a coalition organizer with the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability, and through them I help staff the Blue Line Coalition. And for over 10 years, our coalition has been meeting monthly to talk about not the Blue Line Extension project. For us, it's about the people who live in this corridor, right? And as you heard from my peers here and the project team, the demographics of this corridor are very unique and shaped by history, not only recent history, but past history, right? And the more we extend that notion of history, the better understanding we have about what's happening today. Because if we're like to tell you, oh, there's a train just being built here, you wouldn't think so much about it, but once you start learning about the history, things start adding up. So super quickly, in the last couple of years, we've seen great progress in the area of anti-displacement. And for us, anti-displacement means abundance. We know that residents, homeowners, small businesses who are people of color, who have been enduring poverty or systemic racism are more vulnerable to the pressures that building a train can bring into your community. And that's why these efforts are taking traction. Unlike other versions of this project, Blue Line 2.0 is recognizing some of these displacement pressures, and we're helping extend the notion of when does displacement occur. Usually, the projects tend to address displacement only during construction. That's where you might see a lot of those mitigations looking specifically at direct impacts and design things around displacement, but we're expanding that notion. Before construction, as some council member Hansen mentioned, property starts to flip, right? Like there's people who make money out of us no longer living where we live because they buy the houses, sell them more expensive, rents go up, property taxes go up. And this is a desired outcome of the cities, of the county, of Met Council. They want to see this economic activity increase, but many times that just means that we can no longer afford to stay there. So that's the task at hand. It's not easy, right? But we are making progress and it can be done. We usually hear that there's not enough money, there's not enough time or resources, but we know that if we collaborate, we can tap into that abundance, right? Of Med Council, of Hennepin County, of the state, of the feds. There are programs to fund anti-displacement activities. As a result of the work we're doing, this year the state of Minnesota put forward out of the budget to build the train $10 million for anti-displacement activities, which is truly a drop in the bucket, right? Like we need $1 billion or more, right? Because we want to buy the corridor. We don't just want to survive construction, we want to thrive as a result of this public investment. So we need a lot of money and policies, right? So we got the 10, we're starting to get moving, baby steps, I guess, but as a result of that, there's also a board, mostly composing in its majority of nonprofit organizations, community members, who are in charge of finding ways to allocate these dollars. We've been meeting monthly, and we recently prioritized our spending priorities. So we want to make sure that we're hitting before construction, people with relief on this development pressure. So what kind of programs can we create or fund that are looking at stabilizing tenants and homeowners today? Not in 2027, that's too late, but yesterday, right? So that's what we're trying to figure out. How can we get these dollars to people? Because otherwise we know we don't have a chance, right? We know in places like Austin, Texas, they allocated 5% of the project for anti-displacement. Down there, that produced $300 million for them. So do the math. What's 5% of $3.4 billion? Is that 100 million? I don't even know, I'm bad at math. But that's, the bar that's out there. And there's places like Atlanta, Georgia, where they're subsidizing the cost of property tax increases to a program called the Legacy Resident Retention Fund. So we know this happens. There are programs that are active across the nation. What are we going to do about it? We have the opportunity to not only show this project, this corridor, but this region that we can build projects without displacing people of color. Because that's really at the end of the day what we're doing right here and right now, right? Lastly, we need your help, right? Like I'm here to listen mostly, and I'm happy to share, but I also wanted to ask you, this is the Equity Advisory Committee for Med Council, right? And I think when we think about equity, we like to think that anti-displacement is a tool to bring equity into this equation. And we also know that Med Council very recently was able to secure a historic win in the form of a metro sales tax that's generating how much, like 500 million or 250 million a year for transit projects. So that's where we need your help, right? Respectfully, again, in a spirit of collaboration, Med Council doesn't believe yet, and this is because that's the way the book is written, right? But they don't believe that anti-displacement activities should be the cost of a transit project. They believe that should come from somewhere else. So we celebrate immensely that the project, the environmental impacts are recognized, saying no, they do need to be mitigated, but we need a lot more than that, right? So you can help by asking your council members, by asking staff to explore avenues to fund in a sustainable and substantial manner these anti-displacement efforts. So that's, I guess, what I wanted to share and the ask that I wanted to put of you forward. I don't have all the answers, but if you have any questions that I could help provide information right now for you, I'll be happy to. These efforts are not perfect. We haven't solved everything. I don't think we can solve all the problems, but if we can help tenants become owners, if we can bring relief to the legacy homeowners that carry these projects, because we are the ones who use the public transit system, then I think that we can feel successful around equity and what we're doing here. So, yeah.
Any questions for Ricardo? Yes.
I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation tonight, which has been very informative. This has been a difficult period of time for communities, for Med Council, for all our partners in engaging together around this substantial, transformative work. that will transform communities in many ways. You know, some really, really good and some that we're real cautious about. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, particularly in meeting together with businesses and nonprofits and people in the communities. And also, I would just like to add that I think it's really important that Met Council is organizing around the mitigation that can be a part of the project. And that's some substantial, but not nearly enough. Also participating as a part of the partnership with other stakeholders to understand that much broader work that has to be done, that we all have to participate in. You know, clearly there's gonna be a limited amount for the project budget, but there are more resources that we all can tap into as we look at the changes that will happen in our communities that need to be accommodated so that the people are there, that are there can stay and flourish together with all our projects which are for the people. So thank you very much for that work.
Thank you. You said it perfectly, absolutely.
Before we move on, because we're cut it really close here, but, thanks again, Ricardo, I've worked with you on that committee. But to your specific request, I'm not sure how the process would work. Do we serve as an advisory to our internal here, but whether we could advise like the committee, our own, you know, the full council, and then if approved to the committee of what our position would be. That's something I can look into. I just don't know what the process would be at this point.
Yeah. Anything could help, and I guess the vision here is that, again, the geography and the history are telling us very clearly, if we don't act, we will repeat these harms. So this is a must for us, right? Let's keep racism in the bud. This we must do. But can this be a model regionally, right? Like if we identify the sustainable funding streams, we want to build a BRT line in East St. Paul, and people are afraid of displacement concerns. Well, what about anti-displacement? Maybe that can be a model that we can get behind. So yeah, I think we direct staff to get action and put something on the council at large meeting, something in the agenda to converse about anti-displacement strategies and funding mechanisms. I think that will be an excellent step that we can take to land on more clarity. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're about time. If we could get to, what would your priority be to the message you're here for?
Well, maybe we could just, we can wrap up, we'll see if there's any other questions. We, you know, the EV and Workforce Initiative is part of the construction project. We could come back and talk about that at a future date as we're a couple years from construction. Engagement, I just want to highlight that we've done a tremendous amount of engagement in this process. And we kind of want to recognize that we are taking the engagement and changing the project based on it. And we're not done with engagement, and so I'll just maybe close with the last slide that this is how you engage with the project in the shortest term. And Conco's our lead. We can do he's just been doing all kinds of engagement. So I just want to give it time for any last questions, and we'd be happy to come back. And you know, we're going to be the model for, I think, you know, workforce change on a big project based on a lot of things, community input and lessons learned. And we want to be the model for how you do engagement with the community and businesses and that too. And you know, I don't, we can talk for a long time about it, but I know, respectful of your time, we'd be happy to do that another time too.
I just want to really appreciate that you have offered to come back, and I think that this whole area of work around workforce is going to be really important for us. I'm very interested in the local hiring initiatives.
Yeah.
Clearly, during other projects, we have not been able to understand that as well as I would like to have. I'm thinking Central Corridor days, you know?
Exactly.
And so this is innovation for today. That I think is really very important. So I look forward to your coming back. I know the chairs will arrange that, and to spending some time to understand.
Yeah, especially local hiring, I think we'd be better to come back on that as we are working on that, but I think we'd have better answers and working with OEO and the county, kind of co-present. Just even on that topic, we could spend a lot of time. I think it's very important, so as an example.
Just to add to it, members, that we meet every month, and maybe it takes a while, so if you have specific questions, if you can get them to us, and that's where when we meet, we can really get to where you wanna be and where we have a better understanding.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I have a request.
Yeah.
If we could request you to come back with an update on the community engagement sometime in like March, February, midway, that would be, I think, to me, it would be helpful.
We'd be happy to.
Well, with that, we've run out of time here. Really appreciate the engagement we had tonight, both from both our speakers. I think it's very helpful, very educational as well. With that, yes.
Oh, no, I'm good.
At this point, seeing no action here, I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.